Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Working Lunch. How's everybody doing today? You know, we're over halfway through the week. If you're in the UK, weather is pretty good. Today I'm joined by Una McGuinness, who has got great weather all the time because you're out in Spain.
I am in Spain, but the UK has beaten us this spring, which is fortuitous, I'm sure. But I know the UK weather's been fantastic, so we actually haven't had a great spring. But I'm not complaining because now is beautiful, and it will be till September, I should imagine.
I would imagine that your bad springs are still pretty good, to be honest.
No, we had a lot of rain. Yeah. Where I live, we're up in the mountains a bit, and we just had quite a lot of rain, which we don't usually have, which is really unusual, I know. But obviously all the gardeners love it. It's a lovely part of the world. So as I said, I can't complain.
So everybody's kind of welcome. Everybody's joining us now, sounding off in the chat bar. As always, we want to kind of know what you're having for lunch. Myself, I was pretty rushed. I was rushed, so I had like a couple of crackers basically, and that was it. And you haven't had any lunch yet, have you, Una?
No, I had a boiled egg about 11ish or something. I was up early and I had some porridge. I had porridge, can you believe it, this morning? I made porridge. My husband was going exercising. He said, I want some porridge. I was like, okay. So we had porridge and I had a boiled egg. So I'm going to be a bit later for lunch today.
Which is very typical for Spain anyway, right? You're just kind of you slipped in.
It's the evening, once you start, you just don't stop. I wish. Occasionally that happens.
Thank you, Ian, for the impressive shirt comment. I'm basically trying to outdo Graham, who was kind of hosting earlier in the week. We had a really incredibly impressive shirt on, so I'm just trying to kind of keep a trend going. So Una, it is absolutely great to have you with us today. For anyone who kind of isn't aware of who you are and what you do, can you kind of give us a little kind of quick kind of overview of your kind of background and maybe how you got out in Spain?
Yeah. Well, that's a sort of long and short story. Like with any of these things, I think we were just talking about this before we went live. I think we came out for a year when my kids were very small. My husband was doing a lot of work in the Spanish finance building market, and we thought we'd give it a year, and that was 13 years ago. So we stopped and we stayed, really. So I have been remote working for an awfully long time. Anyway, that's not what we're going to talk really about today, but yes, so I've made remote working and managing businesses from a distance work for some time. So my background is I've had over 20 years recruitment experience, and most of that experience was with a digital media recruiter called Aspire. And I started very much as a recruiter and made my way to the board and became global managing director. And the last sort of 6 or so years of my time at Aspire, I looked after our Asia offices. So I launched and grew our international sort of presence, and also I'd had responsibility for our marketing.
Okay.
So sort of wore a couple of hats as you do in recruitment. And what we're going to talk about today is about what you need to consider before you change your business model. And that's something that I was sort of instrumental in doing before I left Aspire. So first-hand experiences of doing it and the challenges that it faces, that you faced with it. So now I work sort of part-time as a business consultant, and like everybody really, I'm reconsidering and looking at my model and how I operate. For the last sort of year and a half, I've helped various businesses in terms of their sort of strategy and marketing strategy, and have worked very much kind of project-led. But obviously things are different, so it's a different landscape now. So I'm going to be looking at how I can work with communities and do more things online, really. So I think things are changing for all of us, really.
I completely agree. But you do get back over to the UK, or you did get back over to the UK on occasion.
Yeah, I used to come over a couple of times a month. Yeah, so I would always be over, sort of, working with clients or going to events, whatever, and then coming back and then working remotely as well. So yeah, I've done that travel. And before, when I used to look after Asia, I used to obviously travel a lot to see the teams in Asia. But most recently, I've been very much when I've needed to going over to see clients. But obviously, Zoom has made and this and everything like that has actually, I think it's made a lot of people reevaluate, how you do business, and certainly I want to be able to do it in a more sustainable way going forward. So I think I think lots of people will be changing the way they do, and obviously you can support people in lots of different ways with video technology and things like that nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, it's made the world a lot smaller, hasn't it? I think.
Yeah, and I think the expectations are different, aren't they, of people, because clearly,
Exactly. So today, the topic is what to consider before you change your business model.
Yeah.
But I suppose before we get into the kind of the meat of that, it would be good to kind of get your viewpoint on, where the recruitment industry is at the minute, because I think that'd be a good kind of leaping off point,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that obviously it's been incredibly challenging for lots of people. I think if you're a leader of recruitment businesses, whether you've got 2 years or 20 years experience, you've been on a steep learning curve, and everyone's dealing and managing with kind of really new and kind of complex situations. So I think firstly, as I said, there's a lot of complexity kind of out there. I think the kind of key things that people have got in front of them, that they've got to the sort of 5 key areas that I would say that people have are looking at now and have affected, as it were. One is their obviously their cash flow and what they're doing in terms of their business. So there was a huge amount of time and energy put into cost saving and obviously furloughing scheme and all of that kind of thing. So looking at the kind of cost, and as a recruitment leader, it's very easy to look at the top line all the time and the revenue and not to look at the cost. So I think people have learned that keeping a keener eye on the cost is only going to be a good thing going forward. So cash flow and sort of costings and new P&L is one area. The other is your people and your people strategy. I think that, I know you've spoken about this but on these lunch live sessions, but, sort of really looking after your people, who's on furlough, communication, but also looking at externally what the sort of talent and the sort of future job market is going to look like. Where are there going to be the job functions that are going to be in demand, and what talent do you need in your business? So looking at people. The way in which we look at our marketing and our sales proposition. Lots of people I've been talking to, I'm sure you have, about what is it our clients are going to value, and how we're going to differentiate ourselves, and how we're going to use marketing as an enabler for growth. Coming out of this recovery. I think the other key area is that people are having to really kind of drill down on is their client strategy. So I'm sure lots of people have been looking at, what types of clients they want to work with, which clients are least and most effective, and really having a strategy because in lots of markets there's going to be a lot less demand, unless you work in a handful of markets that have seen a real spike. So just working out how you can grab more market share and get a bigger piece of your clients and, reduce demand is really kind of key. And then I think that sort of leads on to, I think a lot of people have been looking at their sort of processes and systems. So how do we operate, and how can we operate leaner and better to build a more profitable business going forward? So there's been, I've spoken to and had a number of conversations with leaders about, what is that operating system? Obviously that does kind of lead on to, the model, but some of that is just kind of really reevaluating what they do well and what they don't do so well, or what the processes are to really kind of optimize those for sort of performances. So they're the kind of key areas. Yeah, sorry.
If we go back to those kind of 5 areas, do you have kind of a scenario or something that kind of we can kind of work through for each area? So I mean, obviously cost saving, you can cut hard and you can cut deep, and you can stop doing your marketing, and there's all kind of other things. And obviously you've mentioned the kind of furlough schemes and things like that. But I mean, is there anywhere else that there are any kind of is there any other fat to be trimmed at that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that lots of consultancies, recruitment businesses have taken salary cuts. So your main costs in the recruitment business are obviously your salaries and your people, and your marketing expenditure and your office costs. Obviously, you've got lots of other bits and pieces, but so there have been people that obviously salary cuts. Obviously, the furlough scheme has been fantastic in lots of ways. I think there are challenges coming ahead with that scheme now. But I think that furloughing, I've spoken to quite a lot of businesses that have given notice on the office premises, so the commercial property arrangements are going to change significantly, I think, whether that's going to be looking at sort of blended models or co-working models and things going forward, or people just taking a much smaller space because their workforce aren't going to be in the office full time, 5 days a week. So really, I think they are the key things. And obviously, I think a lot of people have spoken to their suppliers about lengthening payment terms, and you can imagine freezing some of the assets that they've been using and things like that. Some have been obviously more flexible than others, but I think once you go through all those kind of lines, there's not really that much else you can kind of cut.
I suppose the question I would ask then is that going to be to the future detriment of those businesses? Where is it possible to kind of cut too deep, and is there a scenario where cutting is completely the wrong idea to do at the moment?
Sure. I mean, we would always say, as sort of with marketing at the heart of what we like to do, that you shouldn't, of course you're going to have to reduce spend in all areas, but it's like anything. You're not going to get rid of all of your people, or you're not going to put you haven't put all your consultants on furlough, because clearly that wouldn't be necessarily a sensible move. And I think the same with marketing. There are certain things that you still need to be doing, and I think a level of visibility and communication is to your clients and candidates and your customers is really important. But I think it comes down to cash flow. If you really, a couple of businesses I've spoken to had poor January, February for various reasons. And so then if you've got COVID and this on the back of that, some people have just had to really cut. But I think if you can afford to understand that there are losses that you're going to make, but you can afford to have some level of investment in the business and your people, of course, I think that's definitely, the right kind of the obvious sort of strategy. But I think some businesses, just weren't in that position. But obviously with loans and all these kind of things, I think it's trying to make the call about what level of investment should be on those, certainly things like marketing anyway.
Yeah. And what about the kind of other points that you made? Kind of where can we kind of...
Well, systems and processes, for example. I mean, you've got to get sort of under the skin of your kind of business. So obviously, I would say kind of mapping out the recruitment model of how it works. So if you're a contract recruiter or you're a perm recruiter or both, how does it work from, sort of the whole client management to gaining jobs, to your candidate engagement, to managing the process, to, managing the whole flow? Because there might be areas, for example, where some teams are really efficient and you often find teams don't have very good utilization of systems. So the CRM. So you might have one team that's really efficient with the use of the CRM and is able to match very quickly, or their candidates are coded well. So they have a real sort of knowledge of what's going on in terms of their database. And you have another team in the same business that has poor levels of utilization. So therefore it takes them a lot longer to source, or they're going all the way externally. So when you cut off some of those external job boards or LinkedIn or whatever, they're not able to find the people. Yeah. So I think it's really getting under the skin of what and how people use, what are your systems and processes at the moment, and how could good practices that are maybe used in the business, how can they be elevated across the business?
I guess this also would be a good time. This would highlight the breaks in that kind of process chain as well, where there are potential areas. And we know that some businesses and some consultants are kind of terrible at kind of using their applicant tracking systems and their CRMs. Yeah. And this is a good time to kind of almost rectify that. And and I know from our own experience that's how it's happened.
Yeah, retrain, relook at it. Why do people we used to have a team, with one of the businesses I managed, we had a team where they were really good at using e-shotting when new jobs came in and things like that, and then other areas just weren't using it at all because they were just like, oh, that doesn't work for our market. And so people kind of build up these kind of microcosms of how they work because they were trained that way and they were the last person in. So the senior consultant or their team leader told them we don't do that. But absolutely, I think retraining, and I think there's a lot of evidence to show that, if processes aren't simple, then recruiters won't necessarily use them.
What are you saying about recruiters?
No. But same with everybody, same with leadership teams and boards. If an idea isn't simple and you can encapsulate it and explain it in 5 minutes, you lose people. So I think that having that sort of simplicity, if possible, but also I think you're right, a lot of technology, a lot of recruitment businesses have bought lots of different HR tech and technology to help automate and the heavy lifting, but you often find that only a certain percentage of the tech is being used, or a certain percentage of the business is using the tech.
Yeah.
So you're right, like the applicant tracking systems and things like that, so you might have one team that goes through all their applications and is responds to all the candidates, sort of that, and then another team that isn't using auto responses or anything like that. So I think there's a lot to be said with just having a really keen look at what's happening. And also, from my experience, when you become an operational, sort of senior operational person or director or whatever, you're not necessarily doing the day-to-day recruitment. So, you're obviously focusing on strategy, training, development, all the other sort of things in terms of running the business and making good decisions for your business. But I think it's really important not to forget to go back to the people that are doing that day-to-day and be asking them, what gets in the way, what takes up your time, what are the issues that you're finding? Because I think that's when you get to the real roots of, what's kind of happening, and then they are the people that will come up with the solutions. I always used to say that, the solutions are in the room. They're not, you as a leader aren't expected to have all the solutions to all of those issues.
Yeah, I mean, I completely and utterly agree. And the work that we're doing with some of our clients completely mirrors that. Again, to everyone who's kind of watching today, if anyone kind of wants to ask any questions, just stick them in the chat bar, and we'll try and kind of put those to Una. So you had a couple more kind of points about. So we've covered processes, we've covered managing costs. Yeah,
marketing obviously is another key area. So I think it's time to kind of reevaluate how you're differentiating yourself as a brand. And also what value your customers kind of really want from you. So, obviously a lot of your customers aren't currently recruiting. So you've got to establish what value, what might they pay for in additional services, or if not, what value can you add so that when they are recruiting, or that you get to that table when you can start talking about people strategies and what they're doing kind of longer term. And also I think with clients, it's really, I've kind of really learned that actually being quite vulnerable and explaining yourself your challenges, that can obviously really embed a lot of trust. So I think, giving clients value in terms of issues that you're having and seeing, and also the wider market. I think there's been an awful lot of collaboration and people, like you're saying, it's kind of brought the world closer and everyone being in the same situation. So don't underestimate the power of that. But I think having a kind of clear client strategy for your current clients or your lapsed clients, or the clients or areas that you want to kind of break into, or perhaps you've had some success in but see that there will be demand in those areas. I think now is the time to pull together a sort of sales and marketing plan that allows you to put your brand and your company in front of those people.
I think that, again, it's great that you mentioned sales and marketing, because it's one of those kind of elements that seems to have kind of drifted apart. I think this is a good time. Then you can kind of bring all those people together pretty easily now.
Yeah.
And there's definitely a situation where it should be sales and marketing. It used to be sales and marketing, but as opposed to some how it's gone in the last kind of maybe 10 years, where you've got the marketeers who do the pretty pictures, and you've got the salespeople who just make phone calls. There's definitely now this time, and we're feeling it, that there's time for that to become a much more blended approach.
Yeah, I mean, simple things like looking at, I worked with a marketing team with one client, and we just looked at all the communications that all the touch points and communication points. And, so for example, individual recruiters sending out certain emails and things like that. There's loads of kind of improvables, which don't cost lots of money, where you can really join them together and sort of say, right, okay, well, if we had, this is our tone of voice, this is what we want, we want our brand to be promoted to the industry. So therefore, these are the tools, this is what we're going to help you in terms of your sales process, in terms of comms, in terms of follow-up emails, in terms of, it's great if you've had all that in automation, but if you haven't got it all automated, giving all those templates to recruiters, they really love all that stuff. And once they start to see, actually, this is a process that can really help my BD, I can send this white paper or this insight, or I can send then I can follow up with this, then I can send them this, before I've even had to ask them if they got a job, then that process really starts to kind of work together. So yeah, absolutely. I think that too many recruitment businesses have marketing on the sort of sidelines, and they don't really. But the problem also is that the marketers don't understand the business well enough. So getting them to really kind of understand, what the clients and what the roles are, what the processes, what the challenges are, will allow them to like you're saying, really kind of work together.
Yeah, completely agree. I know we've kind of got a few kind of mentions in the chat box about the kind of collaboration, and that's a great thing that's kind of happening in our industry. But yeah, it's that internal collaboration as well. I think that
you could do a Zoom meeting with a team and your marketing person, say, right, how can we support each other better? What can we do? What have we learned about the markets ourselves, our clients, our candidates, that can help us work together, in a more effective way going forward? And that could lead to some brilliant ideas about integrating the sort of marketing team, and I think, or marketing person or marketing function. Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's lots of opportunity there.
So we've kind of taken stock of where we are. We've taken stock of our recruitment business. We've gone through. We've cut costs. We've looked at our processes. We have looked at our marketing function, and what could a new business model now look like? From your kind of 360, 180. What can it now look like after we've kind of gone through that process?
Yeah, well, I think obviously when you've kind of been looking under the bonnet and gone through all the areas that we talked about, a lot of people are in the situation where they think that exactly they need to reevaluate completely that kind of, they've come to the situation where they think they need to reevaluate that model. Before I kind of jump into kind of what could that look like, I think it's really important that any recruitment business that's thinking of changing the model ask themselves some really clear kind of questions, lots of questions. So in my experience, recruitment leaders always ask a few questions, but they want to get to the solution quickly. So they don't necessarily get really under it, and therefore maybe new strategies then don't float and don't kind of have the impact they would want them to have. So I would say that, what's your starting point? What's your goal? What's stopping you getting to that goal? What is it in terms of the process that you need more or less of? And what are the behaviours that might be stopping that process? If you change your model, it's going to mean quite a big change to all the people in your business, because obviously if you're coming from a 360 where you've got one individual that's responsible for 100% of the delivery, you're going to you go into a model where it's interdependent. And people generally don't like change unless I think they feel that something they value is kind of under threat almost. And if your business is under threat, you need to make changes. So, and it's you as the leader, clearly, who's got to drive those changes through. But I think really kind of asking lots of questions and getting, as I said, bottom-up diverse thinking is so important. This is our issue, guys. We don't have enough new roles coming in. How can we fix this? What would you do? How would we look at? And you'll be surprised. I'm sure, people doing the job will probably say all the things well, we need to have more of a focus on new business, or we should be spending more time on our clients than we are on we're spending too much time on our candidates, or whatever they come up with. All of these things will help you come to the point of, right, so we've all agreed we need to have more of a focus on our client strategy, on our client side, or we've all agreed that the current model isn't working because you can't just go out and get 3 new jobs in a week, or whatever it might be. So I think asking those kind of clear questions is really important.
I agree. I think we again, pulling on some of our experience, when you kind of, even if it's just simple things on little tips on candidate sourcing from one of the recruiters who's doing one thing that everybody else potentially could be doing. So it can trickle down. It can be really, really small little things, some very low hanging fruit that can, elicit a change kind of further up the business, because that could say, right, this person is doing this.
Yeah.
We should be rolling that out a bit further, because there's a success story here. And I guess that is the same across all parts of the business, where there's kind of this little bits of low-hanging fruit that could make that a little adaptation.
Yeah.
Then those marginal gains, as it were.
Yeah. I always used to say, and I've just seen, I think Graham's made the point that people don't like change unless they're involved in the decision-making process. I used to always say in my business, whoever has got to implement the decision, i.e. say the recruiters and the model, they need to be involved in the decision. So if it was a big decision on marketing or something, the board should make it, the person or whoever's involved in the marketing should do that. So or the CRM or the finance or something, if you haven't got that representative of the board, but it doesn't matter, it's the people that are actually implementing it and doing it on a day-to-day. Because if they're not part of that decision-making process and feel they've got input, they won't champion it. And you'll have a very, very uphill battle in terms of communication, changing hearts and minds. And by then, you're going to be left way behind.
That's one of the really big things in most businesses, is that kind of internal communication piece always is that's the bit that breaks down. It's not necessarily sometimes the processes, it's just the communication from top to bottom and vice versa.
Yeah, and I sometimes found that, when you get people in a room and you kind of say, right, this is the issue, this is the business challenge, you've got to be really clear on this is what our goal is, because sometimes then they like to change and go, we don't really need more jobs, or we don't really need to worry about that too much, or, it's fine if this area is doing okay. So you've got to be really clear on the goal. But I think then getting that kind of bottom-up thinking and getting people involved, I think also you've got to, it's quite hard for people to say, well, I think the leader's wrong, or I think, management have not made the right decision, or we tried this before, or not. Anyway, but I think it's really important that as a leader, you build that kind of empathy with your team. And I think a lot of people have during COVID, because everyone's sort of been in a very similar situation. I think there's been a real honesty that maybe I don't think I saw in the last recession. When I managed in the last recession, I remember, we were quite formulaic about some of the communications, because we wanted to protect the teams and we didn't want to tell other recruiters, well, we're having a dreadful time also, but I think now there's been that kind of vulnerability and that sort of honesty has been really refreshing. And I know certainly a shift for me as a leader and other people, that I think then, I think people are going to probably be more likely to be open and honest about what they think will work in the business. And like you say, with the changes, or taking their own personal ego and sort of out of it, what's best for the business, really.
So should there be any more kind of questions that we should be asking ourselves before we kind of move on to looking at a different kind of model?
Yeah, I think things like behaviours, obviously a cost benefit analysis. So a kind of, if we did do, what's the benefit of changing? So obviously if we decided that we need more client activity and more jobs, what does that, how many more jobs from the current situation do we need? And is that kind of, is that, you're not going to flip a coin and just suddenly change something from a very low to 300% increase. That doesn't happen. But, what are the kind of levels of incremental increases you need in an area? What's the kind of, so I'm kind of, you have to get back to the kind of the key performance indicators of the business, and then follow that through with what you think are the kind of current ratios and things like that. So what will that give us? What does that look like? Yeah. So I think, but obviously that might tweak depending on the sort of model that you actually kind of look at. So, I think really, as I said, what if you're not sure on what are the ratios and what's our starting point, because you no point looking at a starting point from last year. Each week it's changing, isn't it? So that's a tricky one. What are our kind of average, workflow KPIs at the moment, and that's certainly something you should be kind of looking at, and how that's sort of changing on a week to week.
I guess half the battle there is understanding that it is changing, and that you've got to keep on top of it. If you are standing still, and I'm not saying all businesses, but maybe kind of burying your head in the sand a little bit and just trying to kind of carry on regardless, that may work. But there's also I think the kind of point you're making is you need to go through this process, whatever, basically, and it needs to be kind of continually kind of reviewed and updated and reviewed and updated, because you're correct. We've not been in this situation before. And you can't assume that previous models are going to fit this kind of square into a round hole.
And also, if you're changing the model in an uncertain marketplace, you've got lots of uncertainties, haven't you? So if you're changing the market in a sort of, in a more stable market, you could probably make some sort of better predictions, but it's challenging at the moment. However, like you're saying, if you're really open with your staff in terms of what needs to change and why, then it might be that your kind of existing model, say you have a 360 or you have a sort of resourcing type model anyway, that it's a kind of an understanding that there needs to be more focus on client activity. Lots of businesses have become or were very account management led, because victims of their own success, grew great clients with high demand. So that's a very different skill set to someone who's going out. Although we do have a lot more tools now, I think, to help us in terms of, if you've got a good marketing plan, you should have more tools that can help you take your brand to market and hopefully bring a level of awareness down the funnel, so that when people are calling, it's not a cold call. But obviously, when I recruited, didn't have what I think we just had a website, but you didn't have those kind of communication tools that you do now, which you should be taking advantage of. But forget that, it's still a different skill set. Going out, chasing those kind of leads, whether they're kind of coming to you at a sort of slightly more warmer level.
On that point, Una, I've got a question from Sarah. It says, in businesses where delivery is separated from sales, what are the main considerations in getting the cost model right and therefore designing your organisation?
Okay, nice big question. Thank you. And the main considerations are, you can't pay out more commission for the same fee. So if you have your P&L and you look at your people costs and your commission and your bonus costs, and whatever that percentage is, up to 30% or something, 33% maximum, I don't know, that's what I would say. So whatever that is, if you have two people involved in the model, like you're saying, that the one person doing the sales and bringing the job on, and then the sort of, that might be a 90, 270, and then the 270 is the candidate and the fulfillment part, you can't pay out more, as a percentage for that kind of fee in terms of, the commissions. Obviously, you're paying two people's salary, but you need to model what's the two together need more than the one whole, clearly, because you've got two people involved. And obviously, it's not necessarily a one-on-one. So you might have one person doing new business, for example, supported by a number of delivery people, because that's the level they're bringing on, or the other way around, two or three people doing more of a new business development model, and one or two people that's able to kind of, you see what I mean, that can do the delivery. So it's not always a one-on-one, but I would always say you can't end up with a 450 pay model for a 360 for a fee, unless you're obviously supplementing and you're selling other solutions and other products and other things that people are paying for. But so it obviously doesn't have to be a one-on-one, but you obviously have to understand what's the uplift in roles, because the person that's doing the new business is clearly not going to get the same commission and bonus that they got for doing the 360. I mean, the other way, which I've seen work, is on the delivery model, that some of those, it's capped. There's a certain percentage of your salary that you can earn, so you can, that I'm only paying X percent. There's not this huge up and down waivers, because people are obviously not having to do the hunting and finding the jobs, but they're doing the delivery. So there's, there's a capped level to it.
Well, I hope Sarah's kind of got all that, and because I think that was pretty thorough. So thanks for that, Una, and I hope, Sarah, that answered your question. We've got a question also from Graham about how important humour is in your communications. So I'll let you answer that first, because I've got a few things.
Well, I think you've got to. I think we're in recruitment. We've got to have a sense of humour, But I think, I think he's being a bit tongue in cheek there. I think it is important to be human and to at the end of the day. But actually, when you're losing business, when you're losing money every week, you're probably not feeling that. You don't want to over humorize something because people might not think it's as important as it is. But I think having that human approach is what I would say, and whether that leads to kind of having a bit of humor and a bit of realism and stuff like that, then absolutely. No one wants to see their leader as kind of sometimes deadpan, never anything else but one dimensional in terms of message delivery, do they? And most recruitment leaders have got fantastic personalities and project themselves really, really well. So I don't think that's a problem for most people.
Just kind of on the back of that, I think something like storytelling is really good in kind of in those kinds of, and that adds to you can bring in that kind of humor and tell those kinds of storytelling. And I know in marketing that's a very kind of big kind of the trendy thing at the minute, but we're getting slightly off.
So that's the model. So if we can so obviously that sort of 90-70 model might be a model. Obviously, there's the kind of 180, but what I would say from that one is learning from experience. It's really clear. It's really important to have the differentiator. So where does the 180 stop and where does it start? So, so for example, if the 180 is more on the client side And do they brief candidates? Do they send people forward to the role? Or is it the resourcing identification part? At what point, do they both kind of work with candidates? Or, so it can get, you've really got to be clear, because people will always say, oh, I know someone that can do that job, I'll call them, and they've just taken the job on. But maybe what should be happening is they're passing that to their resourcing stroke delivery person with the list of people who they think is right, and then they call them and they do that. And also, we found that there was a problem. Our ratio started to go out on our job to fill ratio, because the information the person who was taking the job took didn't all get relayed to the person who was managing the process, because they were like, I'm on to my next client. Mm-hmm. So we, and we identified that as a problem. And so we had to have a bit of duplicity there. So for example, like we're both on this call, we use technology so that the delivery person was able to, where possible, where it had been arranged, listen into the sort of full briefing from the line manager or the leader or the internal recruiter, etc. So although that was duplicity, it saved time from the client, and also they loved it because then they could get that person to write all the ads. So it's really important with that. And then obviously the other model is 120, 120, 120, where you split it 3 ways, and they have account management, and new business, and sort of delivery, as it were, and candidate engagement or whatever.
And what do you need to do to get that right? Where's the kind of where's the gold star in that?
Yeah, I think with the process management, in terms of where it starts and finish, obviously you've already kind of mapped out exactly how things have happened, how things happen in your business. So I think it's no 2 businesses are the same. And I would say, one of the kind of key learnings that we found, although we went externally and spoke to people who had changed their model, actually what works for another recruitment company might not work for yours, because your compliance issues might be different. The kind of level of detail that you have to go into on, I don't know, on sort of candidates, or how you represent your candidates to your clients might be slightly different. So I think it's how you get it right, really, is just by lots of communication in terms of, that process. Most people don't like to give up control of things. So again, it's that sort of, that you need to make sure that the communication, and also that there's an openness for people. There's a lot of egos that go on at work, and we've all got them, in terms of not wanting to be pulled up for making a mistake and things like that. So you've got to make sure that when it's interdependent, I can easily say to you, I haven't got enough detail on that job, or you to say to me, you've made the matches and the process, and the client doesn't want to see any of what's going on. So it needs to be an environment where that's a positive thing rather than a negative.
Yeah. And
then you'll start to get that, actually, what went wrong went right, and actually, having a leader or a manager, a team leader that can be really kind of on it in terms of, are we kind of, because if we're missing our goals in either area, it could be that we're duplicating what we're doing, and that's probably the thing. So it has to come back to the goal, doesn't it? So if the goal of the new business, they're not reaching it, and one of the reasons is because they're spending quite a lot of time talking to candidates, or they're rematching or reviewing the shortlist, or whatever they're doing, then you need to then sort of move the model again, don't you, to where it gets right. So I think it's a moving feast until you get it right. There's no, here it is, do it, and then just deliver it.
The kind of that open scenario where everyone's kind of being very honest with each other and trying to, that kind of, I think some people run a mile at that kind of that kind of way of working. And it comes back to the honesty and truthful piece that we kind of talked about earlier. How do you embed something like that into the kind of culture of a business that doesn't already have that there?
Well, I think, that's a really good point, actually. One of the key questions, which I didn't say you have to ask, is what's the cultural shift we need to make this work? And in our business, it was becoming much more client and, new business focus, and that kind of cultural shift. But also, and I think hands up, we probably learned through mistakes with this, was that opening that up to have that conversation. So I think, you've got to clearly got to feel comfortable with the person and have a relationship with them. But often people that have good relationships even find it harder, don't they, to be kind of critical, openly kind of necessarily critical, but maybe give negative feedback. So I think it's a training and development area that, and I'm sure there are brilliant trainers on here will tell you exactly what you should be doing. I've done it through making mistakes, but I think, you kind of have to run out the scenario. What happens when, James, you give me a brief and I match the right, I do my part of delivery, and then your client comes back, or the client comes back and say, none of these are right. What are we going to do in that scenario? Or what happens if, we don't fill the job? Or what happens if the brief that you've given me, I try and then present it to candidates and no one's buying it. No one's saying yes. Everyone's, saying don't want to work there or whatever. So I think it's probably running through those what ifs as much as possible. I mean, we've only got a certain amount of time, but the obvious ones are going to be there. And then trying to establish, well, okay, in that environment, this is going to be what behaviours should we want to see? And I would say, well, look, I want to be able to say to you, look, the brief I've just got, or the client isn't invested enough in this, or whatever it might be, and how we're going to take that forward. So then we can work together to find a solution rather than be a bit of a stalemate. Like you're saying, it's like everyone wants to go, oh, well, it just didn't work because it didn't work. No one wants to really kind of, so I think you've got to foster that environment. And that's something really, I think that's good for any environment, because most people haven't been probably, if you're managing your own desk, you're not, you have been delivering. The spotlight necessarily hasn't been on exactly what your process has been. So I think with this, we identified that there was a training need, and certainly in the new market, in the new now, there's obviously, people need new skills as leaders do, as individuals do. So I think an upskilling and a training, and there's just an identification of what questions you might kind of ask.
I mean, that's fascinating, because I think that we're now living in a much more kind of honest environment, it seems to be. I've definitely seen that in our own community, that there's a, especially with businesses taking things like mental health very seriously now, and there does seem to be this kind of change, just green shoots, but it does seem to be a change in the way that we are talking to each other.
Yeah,
we're perceived. I don't know if we're perceived that way, but it definitely does seem to be that kind of a more honest approach to the recruitment industry. Let's kind of I'm conscious that we've kind of got a few minutes, but I would like to kind of just go through some examples and kind of points that would be some, to take away really. I think examples would be, is there anything you kind of, of or worked on where this has kind of worked or has absolutely gone wrong as well? Sure.
I think my sort of feedback would be that not within Aspire, when we changed the model, not all teams adapted to it as well as other teams. So what I would say is pilot it in certain. I probably wouldn't go where you are right here, right now, depending on the size of your business. Obviously, if you've only got a smaller group, but if you've got multiple teams, I would say kind of pilot it and trial it first and get it right, because it can be, quite problematic, and it can obviously there's lots of people problems and challenges and things like that. So I would say pilot it in terms of that. I think, yes, absolutely, where we got it right, and the teams that got it right, especially, it really helped us in the really more experienced, say, team leaders and leaders, where they were very proficient recruiters, but just didn't have as much time because maybe they were leading people, where we plugged in the kind of resourcing and the 180 for them. We saw some fantastic results, because they were really able to gain, to give them that time back to manage their team, but also they were able to deliver. Mm-hmm. So I would say, I think making sure that you pilot it. I do think playing to people's strengths is a big thing. So, I think now is the time to be looking, because like saying, if you've had people that have never done business development really, and have been, worked on key accounts or house accounts and things, now, you've either got to upskill them and train them, or you've got to change who plays to, who works to whose strengths. So I think being honest with your business and your people, and paying and working out who has the strengths and the skills and the desire to do those types of roles, I would say is really important. Other things I would say is that it's really important that just changing the model won't fix everything. You need the tools to support it. So if you have a group of business development team, you need to make sure that they've got the marketing and the communication and the tools to support that activity. So and exactly the same on the resourcing type model, like we talked about earlier, the use of the CRM and the use of your tools and things like that. So I think that's really important. I think that whatever, where it went, where it didn't work as well in some of our teams, was that where I think we didn't necessarily have real buy-in from the managers. And so therefore they were sort of like, yeah, but they kind of wanted to dip in and out of it a little bit. And I think they'd say that as well. And I know other businesses that have got a kind of like 180, or even a sort of 180, and it works brilliantly, because the people doing the resourcing or that function have only ever done that, and so really competent and happy doing that. So yeah, I think that's what I would probably say in terms of other kind of key learning points. Again, I think communication is key in terms of what you're doing and why it's the business. And the reward systems is really key, because clearly when people, my experience, they'll sit down and look at what they did last year and what they could have earned last year, and then they'll look at this new model and be like, well, actually, I'm not going to earn as much. But the idea is, no, of course you're not, because we need to deliver more. And also we're not there last year. It's very different, the scenario. So I think that the upsides can be pretty, can be really, really good. But I think you need a real clear purpose for change. And there can be significant, as I said, upsides because of people's strengths and the business needs. And I think your people are the ones that will make this happen. So, as we said, bringing those on the journey, and as I said, the cultural shift, don't underestimate that. So they would be my sort of key kind of takeaways, really, for change.
That is bang on time as well. We got there. Thank you very much, Una. That was amazing. I hope everybody who's kind of tuned in found it insightful. I know I did. I've got stuff to take away. So thanks everyone who's joined us today. I think we were also joined by some people on Facebook as well. Hopefully that live stream went out as well. So don't forget, everybody who's here today, to join Stephen tomorrow for his kind of roundup of the week. And hopefully we'll see you all again soon. I'm not sure when I'm back, but maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe next week, we'll see how it goes.
You're going to Sunday, aren't you? You're going in the garden now. That's what he's doing. And obviously, if anyone that's been on this wants to, drop me a line on LinkedIn or anything and ask any further questions, or if there's anything we haven't quite covered, then of course I'm happy to give my sort of time and answer anything specific that you've got to your business or something. A couple of people have approached me about this, and it needs some thought. But as I said, it's now's the time to be looking at it.
You're pretty easy to find on LinkedIn.
I am indeed.
There's some good content already on there that I've already had a look at. So thanks again, Una, and everyone for
thank you for inviting me on. And good luck, cheerio.
See you, everything.
Thanks. Bye.